Rough Trade is giving away a third of the first 3 months of the Rough Trade Club plus new music membership exclusively to 101 Part-Time Jobs listeners. Become a member of Rough Trade Club New Music and you'll receive the Rough Trade Album of the Month straight to your door every month on an exclusive vinyl pressing with bonus material. Club members have received exclusive pressings of albums from Sufjan Stevens, Sprints, The Last Dinner Party, English Teacher, and Over Mono, just to name a few, this past year alone. Sign up using the promo code CLUB101POD and you'll get Rough Trade's Album of the Month, Camera Obscura's Look to the East, Look to the West for a third of the usual price. By signing up, you'll be getting Rough Trade's exclusive issue of the album on opaque purple in a gatefold sleeve, plus a bonus CD containing 5 demos. Don't want the album of the month but still want all the benefits? Sign up to the standard tier using Club 101 Pod and you'll still get the first month free. You'll also get free shipping on all orders, 10% off at the bar and on secondhand vinyl in store, and exclusive access to sold out Rough Trade events. So don't hang around. Head to roughtrade.com/club and sign up with the code CLUB101POD. That's CLUB101POD and claim money off Rough Trade's Album of the Month today. This offer is for UK residents only. Do you play in bands? I did for the longest time. And I wish that I knew that DistroKid was a thing. I don't even think it existed back then. DistroKid makes music distribution fun and easy with unlimited uploads, and artists keep 100% of your royalties and earnings. 1 million plus artists rely on DistroKid to get their music on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, TikTok, Tidal, Instagram, and all the major streaming services. When you get DistroKid, you can see a DistroKid bank and withdraw your earnings. You get notified when you've earned royalties and you can withdraw via the app. And you can even check your streaming stats on Spotify and Apple. Get 30% off your first year on DistroKid by going to distrokid.com/VIP/101pod. 30% off for your first year. That's not bad. We know it's a tough world out there. Why don't you make it easier for yourself? And to get 30% off that free year as an artist, where you get 100% of your royalties and earnings, go to distrokid.com/VIP/101pod. All right, stay with me. I'll be right back after this.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Kroger, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Kroger worth it every time. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
Judy was boring.
Hello.
Then Judy discovered ChumbaCasino.com.
It's my little escape.
Now Judy's the life of the party.
Oh, baby, mama's bringing home the bacon.
Whoa, take it easy, Judy. The Chumba life is for everybody. So go to ChumbaCasino.com and play over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus terms and conditions apply. See website for details. I'm 100 hour part-time jobs. I'm 100 hour part-time jobs. I've been working Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Working Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. 101. 101.
Hey, you're listening to 101 Part-Time Jobs with me, Giles Bidder. It's where we hear from all different kinds of interesting bands and artists about their lives in music, everything that's gone onto it, all the resilience and perseverance that's required to be an artist today, as well as some of the part-time jobs they've had along their way. I'm really excited to bring today's guest, Lauren Mayberry, who you'll know from Churches. She's been putting out some fantastic solo material recently. The recent track, I Change Shapes, you can hear beneath this, and she's hinting at more to come. She just put out a BBC iPlayer documentary as part of Six Music's initiative Change the Tune, which talks about the abuse that artists are getting online, people writing horrible things online to a kind of a faceless audience, basically. It's something that's much needed in the music world, and if you haven't already seen Lauren Mayberry's documentary on iPlayer, I Change Shapes is playing now. I caught up with her yesterday at Soho Radio to talk about the subject of that documentary, as well as her recent growth of being an artist. When that second album comes out, you're not just fully formed as an artist. There's lots of work and lots of a way to go there. That's what we're all about. That's the story. Those are the kinds of stories that I love hearing. Thank you for joining us for it. 2000 Trees supports the show. It's a brilliant independent festival down in Cheltenham, just a few hours away from London on the train if you're coming from there. But, London's a good kind of reference point. Not to be too London-centric, all right? 2000 Trees is in Cheltenham from the 10th to the 13th of July. Headlining is the Gaslight Anthem, The Chats, who have come off Smoko especially for it, Don Broco, Manchester Orchestra, Bob Villan, Hot Mulligan, Hot Milk, loads of brilliant bands across the weekend. 2000 Trees is such a wonderful festival. It's a great feeling. I've been so many times and I've always come away from it feeling energized and galvanized that independent music can really thrive. So if you want to head to 2000 Trees this year, you can get 50 quid off your weekend ticket by using the voucher code 101pod at 2000trees.co.uk. The tickets are through Dice, but head to 2000trees.co.uk, click the tickets link and use the voucher code 101pod where it asks for it to get 50 quid off that weekend ticket for you and your friends. All right, coming up, it's Lauren Mayberry. 101 part-time jobs.
First name drop clanger of the episode.
Let's go.
Churches did a song with Robert Smith, and I did some promotional activities with him, which was very kind of him to do. He doesn't need to do any of that. He definitely did that because he's trying to help us out. Mm-hmm. But during one of the interviews, somebody said something about music being work, and he was like, I'll stop you there. I paraphrase him, but he was actually making music isn't work. Like everything else around it is what the work is. And he's like, but you do all those things in order to be able to do the thing that you actually really want to do. And I was like, wow. So Rab's basically saying this interview is hard work
right now.
But when he's making tunes, that's not.
And it's a funny thing because we're doing that right now, and people don't get paid for interviews.
No.
But that's kind of what how you spread the message or spread the music.
I dropped my rings there, guys. I looked like I was really shocked.
Another clanger.
Another clanger.
Sorry.
Stop fiddling with them. I'm going to put them on the table. I can't. I just get twitchy in interviews. I'm sorry.
Is it like a case of, it's fine. Is it a case of almost kind of turning off that part of your brain that is the work to then go into the studio and be like, okay, this is what I'm here for?
I think a bit, yeah. I think it takes different parts of your brain to do different things. And like conversations like this, I find it's just kind of like chatting to a person, and like they're a lot more natural and interesting. So that sounds arrogant, but more interesting than most, like a lot of interviews, which are very, I feel bad saying it, but maybe because I worked in music press a little bit before the band, a lot of the time you can tell exactly what angles they know most of the time before they come in the room what they want to write about you, I find, in my opinion. And that's the stuff that gets me quite anxious, because I can tell that somebody's trying to get the soundbite from me to complete their thesis, and it's not based on anything you've said. And I think that is what it is a lot of the time. People have a pre-existing idea and you're never going to change it, and you have to just accept that. But that stuff does make me quite anxious. So I find I used to find it hard writing on tour, and now I find that a bit easier, but it's really hard to write when I'm doing promo, I find. Because I think studio mode, you have to be really open and really vulnerable to get the good stuff. But then in promo, I would say that interviews make me most anxious out of anything, like more than live shows, more than anything, just because, I don't know, it feels, my instinct, just from experience, is to put your wall up and not want to tell anybody anything beyond your sound bites. But that's a very boring interview. But then it's about trusting complete strangers with your vulnerability, and for them to handle that with care and empathy and not turn you into just a clickbait "she hates online misogyny" headline. But 9 times out of 10 that is what happens. So
I think it takes the magic out of like the art for me, being a little bit older now and still being stoked to speak to, whether it's you or whether it's friends or whether it's family, it doesn't matter who it is. For me, talking about music is always like a special thing, because it's like, oh, I feel this way, or I get this thing, or oh, that song just reminded me of being in primary school. Those kinds of conversations where it is about the art and it's about the music and it's about the lyrics. So not to lambast other music journalists, but that's kind of what it's turned into.
Well,
that's what it makes me think of.
They've got a job to do. They've got to make a living. I know that's even harder now than it was a handful of years ago. So, like, no judgment. Like, I get it, but it does make me less willing to be open with people, because
which is a shame. Because what makes a good interview and a good, interesting experience is someone letting it down, letting their guard down.
And I think, as you say, the most exciting music journal that I read is when people feel excited about music and they're connecting about things, rather than when it feels like a bit gotcha kind of.
Yeah.
And I don't think they want it to be like that. I don't know the artists don't want it to be like that. But it is a bit like, surely this is going to eat itself at some point. I don't understand.
Let people breathe. Let life go on. Let people be creative. Go into the unknown. That's the exciting thing. And so you wrote about music. You wrote for the line of Best Fit.
I did that, and The Skinny, a magazine in Scotland, and The List, which is like Scottish Time Out and stuff. So yes.
Did you get into that? Because a lot of that stuff is unpaid to start with. A lot of music journalists, like musicians, is unpaid. Did you kind of know that at the time, but you just wanted to do it enough?
I think in hindsight, I look at it and I'm like, it was because I wanted to be as close to the thing as possible. And just like you described, I thought there was nothing more exciting than being able to sit down with a band and talk to them about music. And a lot of the work I did early was free and for free sheets. And then The Big Issue was my first paid job.
Great.
They were really good to me. They were very kind. So yeah, but it became apparent to me over the course of time that I was like, I don't really like doing reviews. I'm a bad review writer, because I would just describe what I think is occurring, and then that was it. And they were like, this hasn't really told us anything that you think about it. And I'm like, well, it's not about what I think about it. And then I think in a way that made me more conscious when churches started, that I could kind of tell when people were angling for things. Or I think it was almost like media training to a degree. Yeah. But then it made me more disillusioned more quickly, I think. Because I'd be like, what? You've had a job that I would have killed for how many years ago, and this is what you're doing? This is what's going on here? And then I'm like, it makes me not a nice person in the interviews, because I kind of just cross my arms and scowl at them.
The truth of it is an industry built on people who just are so keen to do it, and they'll do it for whatever cost. And the cost is not getting paid for it.
I was just so excited to go. I get to go to gigs, and I remember going down to getting to go to ATP and writing about that, and I was like, this is the coolest, best thing ever. You get to go find new music or see music you love and then tell other people about how good that was. I never really enjoyed the idea that you have to slate stuff. And I think I remember trying to write one thing, and I was like, no, I'm kind of pantomiming what I think cool music journalists write. It's not actually how I feel. But I get that there is a big part of that is that kind of, it's always going to be a part of it.
It's growing, and it's learning what you like, and not everything you go into. And I think this is a problem that young people have today, and probably in our generation as well, is that we were finishing school and we were kind of being told, oh, you could work for a year and go travel in Australia. You can do anything you like. You could travel the world. But actually all those things are pretty overwhelming. So to actually pick something. So if you have a passion like music, first of all, that's you're lucky. We're kind of the lucky ones, because we have that one thing, even if itself is such a broad subject. We start entering that world of music because you're so stoked on it. Yeah. And then after a year, you're like, okay, well, where do I go from here? And you very much realise that you're learning on the job, and you're kind of learning in public, especially if you're writing or putting out music that's for public.
Yes,
don't want to say consumption, but
there's definitely, if it does even exist there's some really embarrassing, not good, pretending to be a grown-up music writing that I didn't know. I'm glad that just exists quietly in the dark corner of the internet. I don't need to see it. But I think that'll be when now I'll look at that with a certain level of fondness, because it is so naive, but it was the beginning steps in taking me to a place. Yeah. It was all part of it. So.
And training for your future job.
Yeah.
So when you were doing, this week, you've been talking to lots of different places about Change the Tune, which is the Six Music Initiative about online abuse. when having that experience in journalism and knowing that when you talk about music, it's not just about the song, you know, it's about the culture. Do you feel like you're quite well equipped right now to kind of have this conversation?
I think I have a better understanding of it in a way that's less panic-based than it was like 10 years ago when we started having these conversations. But even now, like the Change the Tune initiative, when that came up, like we had made a 15-minute documentary that wasn't about that. And then when it was handed in to the BBC, the different sections were chatting, and then Six Music said, oh, we think we can fit this within this campaign we're doing. And my initial reaction was, I really don't want to do that because, again, it's going to frame the conversations. And I knew before this, and it is kind of true, the conversation around the documentary is all going to be about online misogyny, online abuse and mental health, and makes up about 2 minutes of the thing. But at least for once I was like, actually that is a big deal that Six Music are putting all that time into talking about this and into platforming it, so I would like to be a part of that, and that's great. But it was an interesting thing where there was a part of me that really didn't want to do it because I was like, I really don't want to talk about this anymore all the time, because it felt like that ate up so much of the narrative around the band. And if it is quite puzzling for the brain, on top of the actual grim things that are happening, then whenever you sit down with somebody to talk about the art that you made, they don't want to talk about it. They want to talk about, there was definitely moments where I'm like, maybe the art I'm making is not very good, because the thing that people seem to find the most interesting about me is what other people said about me. And then I was like, well, that's quite a puzzle. It's like a thread, you begin pulling it. But I know that's not, I understand that that's not necessarily how it is. It's just, that's an important conversation to have. So I'm glad that they've been handling it with care. But
it's a sensitive issue. I think we're all actually, whether we like it or not, like we've grown up with newspapers like The Sun or fucking News of the World, where you're like, okay, this is what the majority of people find interesting, you know. So if there is like an album that's it's the kind of the world we live in. It's sad, and
it's true. And like I understand that, you know, if they put death threat, rape threat in a headline on the BBC website, more people will click on that than Lauren Mayberry does documentary. And I'm like, yeah, that just is built into the essence of what people think of me and what they think of the band, and it just is, for better or worse at this point. So at least, yeah. And it was really interesting to hear the things that other people had said as part of the campaign, like what Self-Esteem had talked about, and how she's dealt with so many different forms of that over the course of her career. And
Jam Supernova and Craig Charles.
And it like, I'm talking as like a straight white girl on the internet, and I'm like, that's like scratching the surface of what other people deal with. So yeah, dark times. The new track is awesome. Hey.
Change Shapes is
like, it's a bit cheerier.
It's do you know what, it's a real third listen track. First listen I'm like, yeah, go on. Second listen I'm like, okay. Third listen I'm there. It's
I appreciate
cool.
that.
And I think that's the kind of thing that it's the kind of song I think will do really well on like radio and facts of it, like playlists. Ooh. Which is so much of how, I mean, I like to think that I'm not like a playlist listener. I am, just by virtue of having Spotify.
They get you. They know more about you than you know about yourself, I fear.
How are your playlists? Have you realised that do you think they know you?
I think they do, yeah. And I've come to terms. I'm at peace with it now, of who I am. I'm like, yeah, I can look at that and I'm like, they understand me. And then when I click on it, and I will say as much that there are other streaming platforms are available, but Spotify, they've got the recommendations down in a way that the others don't, unfortunately. Yeah.
I remember Spotify coming out 2007. That was when it was completely free, and I remember thinking, oh my gosh, what a great idea.
And it's overwhelming. You're like, anything? Anything? What would I even search for?
And you don't think then about what bands are being paid. You don't think about royalties when you're a teenager.
No, nobody.
I mean, maybe you did.
No, I definitely didn't. I don't remember being a teenager and being like, Lars is so lame. Why is Lars slagging out? Like, he's trying to take down naps, or just let it be, Lars. And then I'm like, oh, Lars was trying to do a good thing, and then it just didn't land right. But yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. And then I understand the argument around it, but I don't really know what can be done about it. From
a fan's point of view, it's like, okay, what's the best thing we can do? Buy tickets to the gig, buy the t-shirt. If they've got a Patreon, £4 a month, great. And then you kind of, then the onions of the layers of the onion you start seeing them, because you're like, how much of a big fan am I of this artist to do it? But churches have that, and you have that. You have a culture. You know, the way I was introduced to churches was through friends who were like, I'm part of this now. I'm part of it. And that's
lovely.
It's a special thing.
We're very lucky. Like, we've been really lucky with that since like the start. I think it was just that specific moment in time. Like, we were like SoundCloud hype machine type era, and then we were selling tickets before we were signed. And I don't really even know, so much of it was word of mouth and then blogs. The reason that we still like have very good tickets now is because of people investing in it. I don't, you know, like without that, like people really invested in it as like an albums band, as like a culture, as you say, rather than, there's definitely bands I know who have had the big single, but I don't know that they have that around it, and I'm quite great. I'm very grateful that we don't. I would rather people be like, oh, they've never had a smash, but they quietly have had loads of these things, and like that feels like a more sustainable, comfortable place to be for me.
And it's like kind of it's like the opposite end of the spectrum of TikTok songs. And like, you can have TikTok songs that are awesome.
And sometimes it translates and they go off.
Sparky Deathcat from Los Campesinos. Yeah,
pretty cool that, like, I do like that it doesn't necessarily need to be anything new. Like, I feel like everything else is geared to like new. But like, a random song can kick off on TikTok. Like Cranberries, massive on TikTok. Like, there's just certain things. It's just about a song being good or catching people's attention. But hard to know sometimes how that translates. There's a lot of cat content out there, man. I get a lot of it.
You got 2 cats?
I do have 2 cats.
Rescued?
Yes, thank you for remembering this.
What are their names?
They're Poppy and Cactus.
Here we go.
And I like that they don't. Sometimes I'll just be sitting looking at them and I'm like, first of all, you don't know what music is, really. You don't know what outside is. You don't know. And then I'm like, wow, just blown through. I'm like, you don't know that people on podcasts talk about you. You probably wouldn't like it very much. Cats wouldn't like that. They'd be like, don't be nosy. And
Mr. Pickles has no idea.
Mr. Pickles.
He has no idea that this morning, right now I'm talking about this morning, him waking me up, and he's like biting my ear, and you can't hate it. You can't. I do not like being woken up. It's one of my least. It's up there.
But by Mr. Pickles?
But Mr. Pickles,
you'll allow it.
Very happy for it.
There was a horrible week on my algorithm where I kept getting videos of like cats and dogs doing cute things with like a sad song over it, being like, every time that you're annoyed at them for chewing the thing, think about the fact that their time on earth is so fleeting. And I was like, oh no, I already think about that. I don't need to be reminded of that.
It's when you get the purr and the slow eyes.
I love the slow eyes. That's my first protocol with a new cat.
Do you carry them?
Give the blinks. Depends. Cactus is much more cuddly, malleable, like most of the time, but doesn't really like being picked up. Whereas
got to respect it.
Whereas Poppy weirdly will allow you to pick her up if you pick her up kind of like a fancy waiter holds a like a tea towel, sort of. She likes the full support under the belly, spine straight, not upwards, and that she enjoys it that way. So I'm like, all right.
That's the safe way.
I must curate it to exactly what they want.
Talking about being a cat waiter, have you ever been a waiter?
I have been a waiter.
How was it?
I don't know if I was great at it, but I've done waitressing jobs, bar jobs, kitchen porter jobs, coffee shop jobs.
The kitchen porter ones are hard because it makes you realise how much food stinks. When it's all left over and you've got 20 different dishes, it really smells like putrid.
And it was a kitchen porter in a fish restaurant in Callander in Scotland, so and then I upgraded to waitress, but there's nothing. I feel like there's nothing, no tiredness quite like the physical tiredness of finishing like a waitressing shift. Like, it just is a different kind of thing. And then getting in the shower and being like, I'm reactivating this fishy smell when the water hits. So
working at the supermarket, I always felt for the few people on the fish counter because, you know, it's not mean. I'm not being mean, but the people who work on fish counters, they do smell of fish.
I was 2 years. I smelled pretty fishy. I don't know.
Would you come home from the work on those shifts, and because working at somewhere like that, it's such a like isolated environment. You know, like when you finish work, you finish work. You know, you don't really, unless you've got a mean boss or some kind of not very nice relationship, you don't take it home with you. You know what I mean? Did you? Yeah. What was your experience with that?
Well, I was talking to a friend about this recently who works in live events, and we were reminiscing about like when we used to work in hospitality and things like that, and we were saying it is kind of similar to putting on a gig almost, because every night you gear up for the gig and it's got to be done tonight, and the gig must happen, the show must go on, and at the end of it you're like, whew, we got through it, that was good, and then tomorrow you're going to do it all again. And I was like, whoa, do we like this kind of like free fall experience? But yeah, there's no camaraderie quite like those jobs, I don't think, like, because everybody's just like mucking in to get it done. And like,
did you see The Bear?
I did see The Bear.
It's good TV.
Yes. And it was interesting. I watched it with my boyfriend, who's never done restaurant jobs. He's done other jobs, but not that. And I was like, you're not understanding the anxiety. The checks are coming through too quickly. Like, they have to fix the system. You got to look your ego straight in. You got to look your ego straight in the eye with that one. You got to look in the mirror, I feel, for those, because you can't get bogged down. You can't. You've got to just kind of like put your brain onto a second kind of mode to. But there was nobody as. Everyone's very sexy in The Bear, and nobody was very sexy in the Calendar Fish restaurant.
Sexy in that kind of like ruggish way.
You know, you're like, oh, he's probably reading a book, a softback book, paperback book, folded over in one hand between shifts. And you're like,
Were you writing all through that for various bands before churches?
Yeah, I think when I was doing the fish restaurant, I was playing drums in a band. So
getting your paradiddles in.
Yeah. Should have done a lot more practicing to a metronome, I feel. But yeah, so that was my first thing in a band, was playing drums. And then in the band before churches, I played drums and kind of got accidentally promoted to keyboards. And that's when I met Ian from churches, and he was like, keyboard singer girl, should come over here. That's
a nice story in the doc, in the iPlayer doc, where it's your friend saying, I knew you were a good singer, I heard you doing backups.
Paul's come off very well from this. I've gotten so many texts from people being like, I watched it and my mum just loves Paul. I think Paul is now just, he could pick up any of the mums very easily should he desire. Good friend. Yeah. And it's so awkward. I was like, I don't want to ask anybody to do it because it'll be so uncomfortable. So I sent a very like, kind of, no pressure, please don't feel like you need to, text to him and my friend Amanda. And then they both did it, which is very kind of them. That's very kind. But then I have to stand near people saying nice things about me and I want to spontaneously combust. So. And Amanda, who does TYCI, Tuck Your In. Yes. Which they didn't say in the doc. They did not, because it's the BBC. Great name. But yeah, she was like one of the main people that ran it with me back in the day. And it's nice that we're still pals now. Yeah, that's awesome. Both of them have been so kind and supportive of me, and definitely like sometimes I'm like, I would really love to see me the way that they see me. Like they see a lot of like I don't know, resilience, or not even talent, I don't know what, but in me. And I do think especially Amanda and TYCI, like the formative time of churches was quite intense and quite isolating. You've said in a few interviews how you couldn't necessarily be in the moment to enjoy it because you were so worried about getting everything right. Yeah, I think so. And just not letting people down, I think. Just I was very conscious of the fact that all of us were out of our depths, but I felt like I was extra out of my depths because I was a bit younger, and those guys are both both trained musicians who went to university to do music, and I don't have any understanding of it, and not I don't understand it, but in that way. And I just felt a bit like I was constantly out of my depth the whole time is what it felt like. And a lot of the time I was the only woman in those environments. I was like a young woman, mostly around older men, and yeah, I think coming home and having friends that like knew me and understood me, and especially female friends that were part of like a female women's collective, like it was I think I would have, I don't know if I would have been able to hack it if I hadn't had that. Probably having a strong support group, whether that's friends or family or strangers on a online forum or wherever. And I think as much as our band's always involved in conversations about negativity on the internet, there has been so much positive that's come out of that in terms of finding your people and finding people that like what you're doing, and just that's been really invaluable. Yeah, and we couldn't have done it without the internet. So yeah, it's an experience, and you say about how in churches you felt maybe, you didn't say this, but you felt maybe like underqualified or underconfident. I imagine the three of you, the journey that you've had since those early days, nothing could have prepared you for it. Well, and I do think it being 10 years since the first album, and the three of us in the band having conversations about that, it was interesting to me to learn how overwhelmed they both felt also, because to me it seemed like I had paid for tickets to see bands that they had used to be in. I'd seen them at festivals, and so I just assumed that they knew what they were doing, but only then, like years later, where they were like, no, our experience level was surpassed very quickly, and then none of us knew what we were doing, but we weren't communicating that to each other. We were all just kind of posturing that everything was fine, we knew what we were doing. So whoops.
And when you look back on those years and you're like, okay, well, we're looking like we know what we're doing. Mm-mm. What was key to that kind of keeping the show on the tracks, keeping on the rails? Was it having the people around you, like managers or booking agents, giving you good advice? Looking back at that time, how do you think you were able to stay on the straight and narrow?
I think we were very lucky that the people around us were very grounded and focused, and we've all talked about there's things we wish we'd done differently at certain points, but ultimately I do think we were very lucky that it's just kind of a happy accident, a lot of it, like who you end up working with and where you end up, like the labels that we were on at the time, I'm like, those were the right decisions for us in that moment. And I don't know, I think as much as I was very overly concerned about a lot of things, I was very conscious of we can only establish this once. So if you say, there's a lot of opportunities that we turned down that I think really annoyed everybody else, because I was like, no, because if we do that, then it looks like that. I remember being adamant I did not want to go on Sunday brunch, and everybody was really upset about it. But I don't know, and I guess I was younger, and to me as a 24-year-old, going on Sunday brunch felt the most embarrassing thing. I can't dance around in the living room. Don't make me do that. Oh God, I used to run DIY shows, and then now I don't think I would be as upset about. You're like, oh, that's what TV is. But at that time, I had no understanding of what that was. And I didn't want to be made to dance around near a kettle. I don't know. I was really disturbed by it. And I think that the label at the time were like, what? This is like one of the only things that they can do. And I was like, it's not cool to be on Sunday brunch. And I think that some of that is like being young and, it's all very high fidelity and stuff. But I do think, had we done all the opportunities that were being presented to us, I don't know that the ethos of the band and the community around it would have been the same as it was able to become. So because
you are, Churches is like an alternative band. It's in alternative circles. It's a synth pop band in alternative circles,
which I do think is kind of like partly because of the music and partly because of the ethos around it. I think it allowed us to slip between the two streams a bit more easily. So I think and I'm sure I was very obstinate and about certain things.
Everyone is, and it's good to have something to believe in the first place. I think is a
and I wish that a lot of it, I wish it had come from a place of like certainty, and rather than, oh, please don't make me do that, because I do think I was always conscious that our decisions affect all of us, but the bad ones will haunt me differently than it'll haunt the guys. Just because of being the front person and being, I don't know, to me I was like, if this band ended tomorrow, they could get other jobs immediately because they're so talented. They can make records for other people. They can play basically everything. I don't have that. So to me I was like, all I have is my reputation. My voice and my reputation. These are the two things I have. So I was like, please don't do that weird thing to my voice, and also please don't make me do this.
But it's pretty radical to care and not be in that position and be like, fuck it, I'm going to go out every night, I'm going to party and just throw it to the wind.
We did do a bit of that, but still turned up on time.
And you cared. You were like, okay, this is this way we want to be. This is the band we want to be.
I think so, and I think there's youthful naivety in that, where I was like, just because it's pop doesn't mean it can't be right on or whatever. But I think that's the stuff that I grew up loving, was like. And I think that was the merging of our worlds, all of us merging that together. But yeah, that Glasgow DIY scene stuff was something I took quite seriously. And now I think there's a healthy balance. Launching
your solo career now, and it sounds like there's more music to come.
There is, yes. You're like, does she work very hard? Why is there only 3 songs? What is she doing? Yes, I think I'd hoped the record would be out before now, but... there was just it just always is like, there was an issue at the legal department of the label and they didn't sign off on this thing, and then the guy that was working on it was no longer available, so I had to find other people, and it's just very boring logistical meat and veg stuff.
And you're part of that. That's in your emails. It's
in my emails, man. I'm good at emails.
But do you take stuff from from the Glasgow scene and what you learned then? Are you transposing that onto the beginnings now and being like, okay, this is what I'm doing. This is the plan.
Love a plan, and I do think I'm like, yeah, that's such a part of the ethos of how I want to approach things, and yeah, even when it comes to like merch or like fan opportunities, like there's never a day in life where I will ever do a paid meet and greet for our stuff, or if like companies or like media outlets want us to do that, I'm just never going to do that. Like when I think about, like, I know what it is to be a fan of things. I am a fan of things, and I know what it feels like to be treated like shit as a fan of something. And I think, you know, I've had conversations with people who are kind of on the periphery of my life about us like stopping to talk to people outside a show, and somebody said to me once that they were like, but that's not your job. Your job is, and they're also a performer, and they were conscious that your job ends at 10:45 when you step off stage. And I don't agree. I don't think that, like, it just seems odd to me, or it just shows that you're a fan in a different way to walk past, just not give a shit about somebody in that position. I feel like that's quite strange way of looking at things, because like obviously very lucky to work with people who are really talented and kind and wonderful, but the label doesn't employ me. Like the fans employ me. Like no amount of label push pressure or any of those things can actually make people care. It'll help get your music in front of people, but to me, I'm like, well, those are the folk that are investing their time and their energy and their money and their lives in your art. And obviously there's a balance. I don't necessarily want them peeping in my windows and like, you know, stalking me at lunch with my granny or whatever. But like there's a balance between, like, to me, I'm like, it's an exchange of respect, and I figured out how to kind of separate it out. Like when people are talking to me, they're not excited about me per se. It's like me as the envoy of the band, of the music that matters to them. And I kind of feel like you need to treat that, like take that seriously and treat that carefully, I think.
Right on. I think right now is an interesting time. I feel personally, I feel like I'm more aware of where I spend my money and my time than ever, because we know that YouTube and Instagram and all these places, they're all vying for our time. That's their value. And so where we spend our time and what we spend our time thinking about and what we put our money to buy, that is what becomes important in our life.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know, not to get on my soapbox too much, but to me, I'm like, life is hard and life is expensive, and it's for like people taking, like, your time is really valuable and your money is really valuable, and people taking time and money to travel to shows. And I just think that, yeah, you have to take that. Like, there's a weight to that. Like, there's a responsibility to that, I think, in my opinion. But I think I feel like that because I was like a message board kid, and like I was in fan clubs and things like that, and like those you're invested in those things because they matter to you and they make your life a little bit better, or you feel a little more seen or a little held or a little more comfortable in that moment in time. And I think it's interesting when people are a bit snooty about that. I'm like, oh, maybe you were just a very happy person. You didn't need to be in the Alkaline Trio fan club or whatever.
Love the Alkaline. What is it called? The
Blood
Alkaline
Pact. The Blood Pact.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
What time?
Do you feel like so you talked about how this new record and these new songs is allowing you to get in touch with sexuality and a more feminine side without having, without knowing that you're kind of bringing two other people with you, and having
I don't
that.
want to get sexy in front of the big lads. That's not
with the boys.
That's not the way. They don't want that. I don't want that for us.
Is that something that's always been inside of you? Have you always had that desire to be that person?
I think
to let that side of you out.
I think a lot of it is just trying to figure out how to have a more balanced view of myself and of my life, kind of, because I think having been so young and been in environments that were pretty male all the time, I think that kind of socializes me in an odd way, maybe. And I think I've always been conscious of, like, even just certain things that I wear for shows now I would never wear when I'm in a band with guys, just because I think even when I worked in offices, I'm always conscious of, I don't want to dress a certain way so that then people will look at me this way or talk to me this way. And, that's for my free time, that's for separate time, which is very odd that that's something you think about first and foremost. But I do think that that's the case for, lots of people in life, lots of women, lots of queer folk. Like, you are so conscious of how you are being perceived and how you can protect yourself from that, I think, a lot of the time. So
Yeah, before you step out the door.
A little
you think,
bit.
Okay, is this going to get me in trouble? Is someone going to say something?
And I think that's quite an odd relationship to have with your body and with your gender and with your sexuality. So
It limits your personality. That's like the
Yeah.
most tragic thing.
So I don't know. I think I just wanted to put myself in a position that, you know, when I'm on the road, can feel a little more comfortable or a little more, you know, I don't know what that'll look like, but freer to explore different things.
Yeah, good fun. It's fun.
It is pretty fun. The tour bus they're both equally fun, but it's a different kind of fun. I think it's just there's a lot more gift giving in this era of life. I'm like, oh, it's cute. Everyone's giving each other gifties. That's nice. But yeah, I think the handful of crew guys on this are the same that I've worked with churches, and it's interesting. I think they must be like, oh, this band give each other little presents all the time. We never get, but I give them presents too, and they're like, thanks.
And your band's made up of women and non-binary people.
Yes,
and that's important, and it's worth saying that's important. I think. I mean, you tell me, but I mean, growing up, I wanted to be in bands with not just guys, not from an aesthetic point of view because it would look like or that it would help the band, but it's like, no, because I want everyone to experience this. I think we want to be invitational going to gigs. We want people to feel invited. And I think what you see on stage is always going to be somewhat of an invitation.
I hope so. I've never even thought about it like that. I was just being selfish and being like, I want to hang out with these folk because I can't hang out with the dudes anymore just for a little minute. For a little minute. I'm sure they feel the same with me. Like, it must have felt odd for them because they all had a certain number of things in common that I could never connect with, and then there would just be this little kind of surrogate younger sister around all the time who's like, can't say that. Like, I think it must.
Did you get that? Would you be in scenarios where you could feel that people maybe wouldn't say things because you were there?
I think it was a learning curve for us at the start of the band, yeah, because they had never been in a band with a female before. So there was definitely things that, you know, the rock talk and the van talk was the same as normal, and then I'd be like, Jesus.
Do you know what I think about is American Pie?
Oh, I tried to rewatch that in COVID, and I was like, whoa. And we didn't make it through. We made it about 20 minutes in. And there's bands now that I loved back then that I can't stomach now. But that's kind of like, was it Jessica Hopper wrote that article about emo and like women in emo and how girls were such a fundamental part of the emo scene because they made up a huge portion of the fan base, and they were doing the street teaming, they were supporting all these bands, but how like the songs that were written about them and the way they were treated by those bands was really horrific. And I look back on certain things, I'm like, oh no, that song's not for you, those lyrics are not for you, but you're too young that you don't know. And I would sing along to certain Glassjaw songs that now I'm like, oh, good gracious, we can't be saying that. And, you know, like, I was a huge fan of Brand New and, like, dark stuff.
On a good side, you know, there was stuff like Postal Service and Death Cab for Cutie, and you had your first solo shows.
I did.
With them.
I did.
And that's awesome. What was it like seeing Postal Service? I've never seen them.
I mean, it's like really special. Like, both, like, Ben and Jenny's voices, and I feel like they're, like, some of the most identifiable voices in my record collection, and hearing them both, like, their live vocals are like, they sound like the record, and they're all just such nice people. And
great to hear, because it's a record. That record is like, okay, it's quite it's like these are nice people, first of all, and I feel my life is nicer for this record.
Yeah, and I do think, you know, like, the way that Death Cab were talked about, like, it was such an era of, like, music criticism. I think about, like, Death Cab or even like Coldplay, like, being nice guys in rock music was so cringe, and it was talked about as like, oh, it's so wet and so cringy and so this and so that. But I think that's because I'm like, well, what the culture we were actually celebrating was quite bad. It was quite bad.
Yeah,
there's a lot of dudes acting pretty abhorrently.
Did you read that Misogyny in Music report that came out in January?
I read, like, some of the news articles about it. Yeah.
It found women were underrepresented, there were limitations to women's careers in music, and there was abuse and discrimination. It's like black and white. You can't ignore that. Yet there's that overwhelming feeling of nothing's going to change.
Even, like, when I read Lily Allen's memoir, and she talks about being assaulted by somebody that worked for her label, her publisher, and that's horrifying. Like, there was nobody to protect a vulnerable person in that situation, and that, like, who do you report that to? Like, there is no HR in music that can help you with that.
And you feel like speaking out is going to be a detriment to your career, this thing that you've worked so hard for.
And it's very scary. It's very scary.
What's the, at the risk of trying to sort of make something simple, but I mean, just wanting to put a step forward, I suppose, like, what's a good, solution to that, immediate solution? Is it surrounding
Solo
yourself?
careers? No, I don't know.
There we go. Surrounding yourself with good people?
Yeah,
and working in small teams?
I do think that's why, like, as much as I talk a lot about the negative side of the music industry, I do think I've been very fortunate because I have been protected in a lot of ways, but from the luck of having chosen certain people to work with. But yeah, I really don't know. I think any environment that's if you're not receiving any other perspectives, then I think that's a mistake. And I think that's one thing I would say about how we curated the band's experience for a long time, was that we weren't very conscious about making sure that it wasn't just our perspective all the time.
Whose perspectives would you hear, like friends or various other people?
Just that if everybody we worked with was a straight white man of a certain age, then you're only going to get that perspective.
I see. Like background perspective and experience.
I think so, yeah. And then also, that's just not, like, when I think about it, I'm like, yeah, that is odd. When I wonder certain things, I'm like, why is my brain a little pickled in this specific way? I'm like, because you spent 10 years only being in rooms with mostly older dudes, and there's not lovely older dudes, but it's still odd. Like, if either member of Churches had to be on a tour and in radio stations and in venues with only women all the time, they would find that quite baffling. Or it would be commented on, and it was just never commented on. And I didn't know to ask for anything different, so I was like, well, this is what it's always been like. I've always been the only girl in the band, or the only girl on the bill, or the only girl on the tour bus, or the only girl on the festival. And I do think some of those things have changed in the last however many years, even if they're only changing them because they know if your festival is not representative enough, you'll get shit on the internet. But at least it's still changing. So
has your perspective changed on, okay, well, this is what it is and I can't change it? Or are you a bit more now like, okay, I can change this. If I'm in control, I'm in charge?
I think that's the part that I'm more conscious of. I think, yes, the overarching, say the thing, make the stand, but also make those changes where you can in your actual day-to-day of, like, who you're working with and what you're working on. And I think that if those are the only things you can control, then you can change those things.
Yeah.
Like, I can't suddenly make everybody not misogynist and not racist and not homophobic and not transphobic, but you can make the statements that you want to make on those things, and then you need to put in the work, and you need to put your money where your mouth is, and you need to actually drill down into it, I think. Which I think when I was, even like, it was the fourth Churches album where I was conscious that I could lead the conversation on the aesthetic of the records. Like, it never, sounds dumb, but that never occurred to me because I'm not a visual artist brained person, and I would always pick the video treatment out of the list of treatments that got sent. And then after, like, yeah, we worked with Dave Stewart of Eurythmics, and we'd worked with him on a couple of songs that didn't make the third Churches album. And genuinely, it had never occurred to me before talking to somebody with a brain like that we should be dictating the terms of all that stuff. Like, we were just chatting over, like, a cup of tea or whatever, and he was like, but clearly you know what you want, so why don't you just ask for it? And I was like, what? What do you mean? And he was like, yeah, I got an album cover done by Damien Hirst because I just asked him to. And I'm like, well, I don't think we can get that, Dave. But, like, I'm like, he was such a holistic artist in that way that had never really occurred to me to do that. So, and then on the fourth Churches album, I was like, guys, I think I have it. And I'm like, this is the aesthetic, and this is what all this should look like, and let's write the video treatments, and let's just be a lot more hands-on with that.
Yeah.
And I was like, 24-year-old me didn't even know that was an option. And I wonder, there are 24-year-olds who have that confidence and that creativity, and I just didn't know. I didn't know.
I think music, when you're an artist or play in a band, you're so aware of how other bands have done it and how other bands have been successful, and this is the right way and that's the wrong way. But I don't think any of that really matters, but it's always going to be so ingrained. I mean, have you seen those 2 Guardian articles that came out? One came out yesterday and one came out last week, and they were basically kind of case studies of bands and how much money bands spend and how much money bands lose, really.
Oh,
and we can't.
Sounds chilling.
I mean, and that's the kind of thing when you start a band, you're like, okay, we're going to lose money for a long time before we make money.
Yeah, and I think there's certain businessy things that you just don't. I'm like, man, I wish there was a way to know things or ask people. Like, I think that's how a lot of artists get screwed over, is because they don't have anybody to ask. Who do you ask? Most of the time, if something like that's happening to you, of course you don't know anybody else that it's happening to. And then we were very lucky that our manager had been working as a tour manager and as a front of house, so he knew enough people in the music industry. We were the first band that he managed, but by that point he was like, guys, I know a good lawyer, I have an email for this guy. So we were very lucky that from the off we had like a proper bulldog.
Yeah.
But then otherwise we wouldn't have known any of that.
And you might have even been like scared or nervous to be like, we don't want to sound like we don't know what we're doing.
Oh yeah, and there's so much, like, if I ever see like interviews from like early churches, I'm like, you don't know what you're talking about. Like, there's
well, as in you're saying what you think you should be saying? Kind
of, yeah. Like, especially about music stuff, because I was conscious that I've never been in a synth band. I don't really know very much about synths. Not wanting things to sound too quantized. To this day, I'm not really sure what quantizing is. But I clearly heard the guys say that, and I think I was like performing to them and performing to the public because I wanted to seem like I understood it. And now I'm like, the tech side of things is never going to be my forte or my gift. And that's fine. I'm
a big believer in, sometimes in a conversation, you say a word and you don't know what it means, but you say it with confidence. I'm a big believer that actually that comes from a place that you're not even aware of, like some deep subconscious, where you have used someone say it in the right context, or you've read it in a book, so you kind of half understand the context.
And studied the idea of it. I just studied the idea of being a thoughtful man in a rock band, but I didn't know. And then now I think the most exciting thing to me is if you're having a conversation with somebody and they say, "Oh, I don't know about that. What is that?"
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow.
That's a superpower.
Yeah. To be able, or be like, I've never heard of that band or that person or that thing. Tell me about that. And I'm like, you have the keys. You know, you're wiser than I.
Yeah, awesome. Lauren, thank you very much for the chat.
Hey, thank you for having me.
101 Part-Time Jobs. Everyone's, especially if you're an artist or a musician, most people have worked a myriad of side hustles, part-time bits. That I feel like kind of dipping into and out of work means you get in positions where you are maybe too nervous to ask what to do, and you'll get in a sticky situation and maybe make a work gaff, a classic work fuck up.
I've done a lot of work gaffs. I was like I hope she doesn't hear this, but I was a personal assistant for like a film and TV producer person in Glasgow for a while, and she asked me to clear out a cupboard of all this kind of old tech stuff, and she was like, sell what you can, take the rest to the dump. And I was like, okay. And during that I took several hard drives and I took them to the recycling place, and then a couple of weeks later she was like, where are all those hard drives with all the backup files from a film that she had made? And I was like, those are definitely gone. Those are in the electronic items recycling section of Glasgow City Council. But then I was like, I didn't see those when I was tidying. And I just bold-faced lied to her because she was quite scary. And I didn't want to tell her. So I don't know if that's good advice. Don't lie. I think it's better to own up to what you've done. And then, hopefully that person has the humanity to remember that they too are fallible. But yeah, it was pretty bad. I was just like, no, I didn't see those during that time. No, didn't see them. So pretty bad.
But you know what? I suspect that most bosses of big companies have got to where they are by not admitting to mistakes.
See, now I'm like, that was not the right approach. But maybe I could be more powerful if I'd kept that mentality and be like, if anybody's were like, now if someone says you did this wrong, I'm like, oh no, did I? Probably. Whereas if I just been like, don't think so, I don't agree, maybe I would be like stratospherically massive. I don't know.
You're rocking it. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
New music is so good.
Thanks, dude.
And it's fun. It's fun.
Yeah.
It's free.
Life's hard enough, isn't it?
Yeah.
If tunes can't be either, it should be fun even if that fun means a big sob. You know what I mean?
Oh, big time.
So-
I think you can laugh and cry at the same time.
A little bit of everything.
I love doing that. I make my Friday mornings that.
I had a little cry just yesterday.
Yeah.
I'd never been to Hampstead Heath, and I cried on the Heath, and I was like, why am I crying on the Heath? Don't know.
Awesome.
Don't know.
I mean, writes itself, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's the... I mean, I'm sure there's a Taylor Swift song.
Yeah, you're a Swiftie.
I do enjoy a bit of Ms. Swift. Yes, I do.
We'll do that on the next one.
Yes, dedicated episode
Yeah,
to unpack the lyrics of the Torture Poets. Yeah.
big time. Thank you very much. So there was Lauren Mayberry here on 101 Part-Time Jobs. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you subscribe to the show. We put out 2 episodes every week, always with interesting, exciting artists who are putting new music out. Thank you for listening, and we'll be back next week. So click that subscribe button and follow the show as well. I heard that following the show makes a big difference for us. So anything you can do to support the show would be massively appreciated. Thank you. DistroKid is where you can release your own records. You can sign up, create yourself an account, and have your music out on Spotify, Apple, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, all of it. So if you've got a friend or a cousin or colleague who plays music and wants to put out their own records but isn't sure how, tell them to head to DistroKid, and at distrokid.com/VIP/101pod they can get 30% off their first year. That's at distrokid.com/VIP/101pod.
101 Part-Time Jobs is hosted by Giles Bidder and produced by me, Olivia Swash. This has been a Mighty Moon Media production.
Hello, it is Ryan, and we could all use an extra bright spot in our day, couldn't we? Just to make up for things like sitting in traffic, doing the dishes, counting your steps, all the mundane stuff. That is why I'm such a big fan of Chumba Casino. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere with daily bonuses. That should brighten your day a little. Actually, a lot. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com. That's ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
Hey, podcast listener. Do you love talking about movies, music, TV, comics, and games? Then you should be listening to The Great Pop Culture Debate, back and bigger than ever for Season 9. This season, the panelists discuss the best James Bond film, the best Elton John single, the best Nickelodeon original series, the best Batman villain, and so much more. Find the show wherever you listen to podcasts, or head to greatpopculturedebate.com. More than 100 topics are already available. Subscribe today.